Good morning. It's Friday, March 17th. Now, I've been looking at the situation in Israel for as long as it's been going on. And there was a compromise issued or suggested by the Israeli president, Herzog. And the Israeli president is nothing more than a figurehead. But he did step forward and offer a compromise to Netanyahu on the way the government was being constructed right now, and he wanted to change certain points. And the major issue in all these points is the actions of the judiciary in Israel and what they can do and what they have been doing. And the people in Israel are very upset with what the current government is doing in trying to take over and suppress the Israeli judiciary. So I decided that it was worthwhile making a comparison between the Israeli judiciary, their Supreme Court, versus our Supreme Court. And here's what I found out. First, we must understand that judges have an important role to play in a democracy. And under the United States system of separation of powers, the unelected judiciary is a co-equal branch along with the elective legislative and executive branches. In the U.S., judges are appointed and then they are confirmed by the Senate. Okay? So we have three primary branches of government, right? And even though the judges are not elected, they do have a high status. And American judges have generally been cautious about exercising their power. And the interesting thing about American justice is they act only when there is an actual case or a controversy, and the litigant, the suer or the suee, whatever you want to call them, has standing. That is a personal stake in the outcome. And they use these tools of judicial restraint to assure that they don't usurp the proper roles of the elected branches. So the U.S. judiciary supposedly is supposed to be very careful in the way that they come to their conclusions. But nevertheless, as is the way in any free-thinking society, there are sometimes criticisms for the finding or the ruling, or some say the inventing of the basis of the decision of our Supreme Court. And we've seen that. We've seen what happened with abortion. We've seen what happened with gay rights. They get overturned, right? And no basis for the overturning other than it's a new group of justices with a different thought process. And they use the Constitution. Now, Israel doesn't have a Constitution. But the Supreme Court in the U.S. uses the Constitution as a basis for making a lot of their decisions. But the Constitution really doesn't say anything absolute in a lot of cases. So our Supreme Court makes decisions based upon their interpretation of the phrases in the Constitution, such as the famous well-regulated militia means that everybody can own a gun, okay? So that's the U.S. Supreme Court situation. Now, Israel is a parliamentary democracy. And in a parliamentary democracy, the judiciary is subordinate to the legislature. And the executive, the chief executive, like the president, is part of that legislature. So they are not the top officials. They're usually somewhat independent, but they're not always independent. And they rarely sit in judgment regarding laws enacted by Parliament or actions taken by the executive. And this is true in many countries where there is no written constitution. And Israel doesn't have a written constitution. But they do have something called the basic laws. And those are quasi-constitutional in nature. But unlike the United States Supreme Court, which is contained by the requirements that there must be an actual case or a controversy, and that case must be brought by someone with standing, the Israeli Supreme Court declined to accept such constraints on its power. So they can go and do anything they want, basically, if it suits them. So they're not trying cases. They're not delivering decisions based upon some individual or some corporation or some entity presenting certain facts as to what's going on. The judiciary in Israel is picking out things that they want to decide. So they are like an independent entity. So this formula, if I can call it that, has led to controversial decisions. And then there are critics who believe that they did the wrong thing. But then there are many who believe these essential decisions have been necessary to maintain the rule of law, have imposed restrictions on military actions against Palestinian terrorists. And human rights groups have praised those actions. But there are many who have not praised those actions. So when you have a democracy like Israel, right, an activist Supreme Court whose decisions directly impact the lives of citizens can't expect to be 100% correct in the eyes of many people who watch their action. Bottom line is, if you have an active Supreme Court, then you are going to have controversy. That's just human nature. You can't please everybody all of the time. The Israeli Supreme Court has 15 judges on it. And they have what they call a president and a deputy president. They don't call them chief justices. And so when you have 15 justices working, all of them don't work on the same case at the same time. They divvy up the justices in appropriate numbers to decide certain cases. And they make sure that the justices are not those holding the same exact position on it. So many times they're like picked out of a hat to go take care of a case. And let's all remember this important fact. They are subservient to the Knesset. They are not an equal branch of government. So anything that the Israeli Supreme Court decides can be challenged by the Knesset. And right now, the shape of the Israeli government is to challenge everybody who is challenging them, because they are running rampantly toward a dictatorship. And so that's what the Supreme Court in Israel is all about. And the mere fact that they can decide cases where there is no real case has the Knesset, who is technically their boss, very upset. And Netanyahu, who is equally upset and is not willing to compromise. So I leave you with those facts this morning. Have a great day. Bye.